What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we got a great episode outlined for you today. We are recapping UFC Baku, and there were some great finishes and great fights on the card. Of course, Rafael Fiziev stealing the night in his home city. We'll talk about that and what's next for him. We're going to get into a little bit of Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, and the moving parts at 155. Charles saying that he's got a fight booked, Arman Tsarukyan, the likely contender, and then there's some Ilia Topuria news as far as when his return might be, and it's actually way earlier than we thought. And then, of course, we couldn't finish this episode without talking about the outstanding performance of Jaron Ennis in boxing to become the 154 champion. So we're going to get into that at the end and some other fun fights that happened on that card as well. Everything below in the timestamps as always, so if there's something you're most interested in, you'll know where to find it. But we, Nick, are going to start today with UFC Baku.
Let's do it.
And let's start with the main event. So Rafael Fiziev really showed us that he's got some of the most electric striking in the game.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly some of the most electric in the 155 division. And I don't know if there's anybody in the UFC that does Muay Thai as well as Fiziev does. Now, I think there's better strikers as a whole in the UFC than Fiziev, but when you think of just pure Muay Thai skill and the ability to, as they say, the art of 8 limbs, use all 8 limbs at any point in the fight to get the job done, it's so impressive, right? And Manuel Torres, the finish happened at the very, very beginning of the second round, but this is the first time in about 8 years, if you can believe it, that Manuel Torres, win or lose, has been out of the first round, and he only made it 15 seconds or so into the second. But This fight was electric from the beginning. Manuel didn't do nothing in there, right? He had some success in the first round. He was landing some shots. It was very high-paced, big power coming both directions, but ultimately just the clean striking ability, the depth of tools that Fiziev has, and his power is what won him the night.
Yeah, and Rafael Fiziev definitely had his back against the wall with this one, because there was a time where we thought he was going to be right in line for a title opportunity. And of course, he's had some losses. He was able to bounce back a couple times. 2 losses to the current champion in Justin Gaethje. But with Manuel Torres coming up, he's been this guy that's electric. He's always getting first-round finishes. And like you said, even if he loses, it's usually an early night for both men. But I thought this fight was really fun. They picked the right 2 guys to main event this Baku card, and I really did love how Manuel Torres was able to go out there and try to compete in the first round. He made it interesting. He landed some decent shots, but Rafael Fiziev showed levels as far as the striking's concerned. And as far as like entries go and feints and his ability to get his opponent to freeze momentarily so he could open up more striking is what separated the two. Rafael Fiziev is so good with his feints and his posturing. He has a high guard when he needs to. He chops legs when there's nothing available up top, and basically sets really good traps. And a guy like Manuel Torres, yes, he's very skilled. He's got a ton of power. He's huge for the division, but some of his entries and the way he would start attacks seemed a little bit telegraphed. And a guy at the level of Rafael Fiziev is going to see every little nuanced detail in your movement, and he's going to collect data on that and pick up on it and get out of the way. And that's exactly what we saw. Rafael Fiziev was able to, like you said, utilize all 8 limbs. He's throwing elbows when he needs to. Beautiful boxing. His hands are actually really good for a Muay Thai fighter. A lot of times Muay Thai relies heavily on the kicks and the knees, and especially depending on which camp you come from in Thailand. Now, Tiger Muay Thai has become not just a Thai fighting gym, but now they cover MMA. There's great grappling there, everything like that. But that's where he comes from, and he's able to utilize really clean boxing to mix in his kicks, which are thunderous. And then he's got the great knees, he's got the great elbows. But what I really loved, maybe the highlight of the first round for me, was that catching the kick, immediately sweeping Torres right off his feet, putting him on the ground. It just showed the level. And I think that is partially what killed the confidence of Manuel Torres. And the first round, while it was somewhat competitive, I definitely had it going Rafael Fiziev's way. Now, he did get touched a few times in the very late portion of the round, but as soon as round 2 started, he came out guns a-blazing. It only took about 15 seconds for him to find that shot. And the spinning heel kick, beautiful. And Manuel Torres did everything right. His hand was there to guard the kick, but if you go watch the slow-mo, it's like it was 1 inch off his face, and then the kick hits his hand, and then his hand hits his face. I thought that was really cool, because most of the time when you see somebody with a high guard, even those heavy kicks like that don't always make it through. But Rafael Fiziev kicked with some real power, and as soon as he hit Torres, dropped him, the ground and pound instincts were there. He knew exactly how to select shots and pick the right ones. It looked like the ground and pound really was what caused the orbital issues, and I don't think it was an orbital bone.
More like a
fracture.
cheek, the cheek that got busted up.
The hematoma on the cheek is what you could definitely see. So it only takes Rafael Fiziev a short amount of time to finish the night on pretty much anybody. And he called out Charles Oliveira. He wants the BMF. He had a great opportunity on the microphone to call his shots. Now, do I think he's going to get Charles Oliveira in a BMF fight next? Probably not, especially because we've been talking that Charles Oliveira seems to already have an opponent and a date lined up. We haven't found out what that is yet, but I do think that Rafael Fiziev, especially after last night and his fan favorite style, definitely belongs in the conversation of BMF. And I feel like that win, being a main event, 5 rounds, it only went, a round in 15 seconds, but that sets him up perfectly to kind of move back in to a meaningful place in the rankings and really try to get another legit run towards the top of the division, especially with how open the division is sort of showing itself to be. Like, we have Justin Gaethje, and it feels like, yes, he is toying with the idea of retiring, but at the same time, he's come out and said, I'm leaning towards coming back and fighting again. So I find that interesting, but I also think that reign is going to be short-lived, which means everything's going to open up potentially with a vacant title down the road. So then you've got your Armans, your Roofies, your BSDs, your Patties, even your Charles Oliveira that could make their way towards the top, and that takes basically 2 guys out of his way, which brings him even closer down the rankings. So I think there's some good opportunities and some really good matchups for Fiziev moving forward. I just think he needs to stay on track and keep doing what he's doing.
Well, he was one of the biggest losers with the Meta AI rankings when they came out, because he went from being ranked to being unranked. And then I said, well, he's got the opportunity, in a week's time to immediately turn that around. And I do expect with his performance, because the Meta AI rankings are now taking into consideration the skill level of your opponent. And when you're talking about a guy who's on just a rack of first-round finishes, that's got to account for something. And then when you finish him early, that's got to help bode well in your favor as well. There's recency. There's all kinds of factors that we're still learning that go into these rankings. So I think that Fiziev is going to be highly ranked. I don't think maybe not quite into the top 10 yet, but certainly close to that number 10 mark if I had to take a guess.
Well, and before the AI rankings came out, I think he was number 11, and now he bounced out. But if you looked at the tail of the tape and the little visual they have at the bottom of the screen, I think it did say 11 when he was fighting last night. So,
did they give him? I didn't catch that.
So maybe the AI rankings aren't exactly what they're going by just yet, but I also get why maybe they kept and preserved the rankings that they had, because this was the first week of the AI rankings, and it always hurts a card if you've got a main event with 2 guys that are completely unranked. So it makes sense that they would have left those rankings there. But at the same time, after beating a guy like Manuel Torres and doing it the way he did it, he certainly belongs in the top 15 for me.
Yeah, just real power. When you think about that spinning heel kick that he landed to end the night, well, it wasn't the shot that ended the night, but it was certainly the shot that started the party that ended the night.
The beginning of the end.
Exactly. And then that same kick, he throws that probably better than anybody in the UFC. Think of the Brad Riddell fight.
Oh,
Remember,
yeah.
he made Brad Riddell call that fight off himself, if memory serves me.
Yeah.
He hit him with one of those, and Brad Riddell was like, yeah, we're all set here.
Yeah.
He's like, I couldn't see for a second. And even though it shows you, as you mentioned correctly, Manuel Torres' hand was in the right position.
Right.
He was Now, obviously, the best defense to that is not get hit by it.
Right.
It's to step out of range or to do what Fiziev does when people throw those at him, which is to do the matrix lean back.
Yeah.
But the second best thing, if you're not going to be able to matrix your way out of that kick, is to put the hand up and just defend on the hand. But even still, having the hand there as a buffer, it was enough to get the knockdown, which shows you what kind of force Fiziev throws his kicks with. And it's not just that. He throws a body kick from hell.
Yeah.
I mean, that body kick, you can hear it from your TV screen if you've got the volume down to almost mute. It's that thunderous. And another thing that I just want to touch on about the technique of Fiziev, it didn't really have much in the way of like making the difference last night, but it's just his offensive wrestling, I think, is worth noting. He's really good. And you saw one of the Hickman brothers in his corner last night, Tiger Muay Thai. they started out as just a pure Muay Thai camp, and they have evolved into a great MMA gym. And the Hickman brothers are in charge of the wrestling program over there. And when you see how good a guy who was a pure Muay Thai striker is able to mix in wrestling into his game, even against Justin Gaethje, he had tremendous success getting takedowns against Gaethje.
Right.
It shows that Fiziev at 33 years old is still a live prospect in the division. He's always going to have trouble with people like Rufi, as we saw, right? Because he's got that fluidity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Muay Thai guys, if we can criticize the art of Muay Thai, which there's not much to criticize, but there's an element of predictability and there's an element of rigidity.
Yes.
And they're a little bit more rigid. They don't move their head as much. They're kind of in a cadence that's somewhat predictable. Whereas a Rufi, he's like, almost like a wizard in there. He's moving with extreme fluidity, like Conor McGregor used to move back in the day. And so, that's going to be the biggest thing for Fiziev. When he gets in there against the elite strikers, we see sometimes he can have the tendency to get caught.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the biggest X factor. But I think that he made the right decision in asking for the BMF belt, because I think anybody who's a fan of the sport would say that if you're thinking about fighters that fight in a BMF sort of fashion, if we're going to call it that Rafael Fiziev would be one of those people. And with good offensive wrestling, he might be able to negate some of those takedowns of Charles Oliveira and force Charles into a stand-up Muay Thai war, which I think a lot of people would love to see. Now, I don't think Charles is going to be his next fight, but he's very similar to Diego Lopez in the sense that he's got 2 losses to the current champion. So and he's got a loss to Rufi, and he's down the pecking order. So he's like, okay, I'm not going to shoot my shot at the title. I'm going to shoot my sights on something that I think is attainable for me, given my style and where I'm going to be in the rankings, which is why I like the BMF call out.
Yeah, I love that call out for him. And I think it's it's lofty for sure, but I also do understand why he's trying to sort of put himself in there with a guy who needs an opponent. Now, of course, things are going to change and we're going to get into what's going to happen for Charles, but if Arman Tsarukyan isn't the candidate, I don't really know who else there is that would jump the line over Fiziev as far as being BMF material that Charles Oliveira either hasn't already fought or isn't already booked. So Rafael Fiziev, obviously he took a long shot, but crazier things have happened than a guy like him getting a BMF title shot.
Yeah, and let's move into the co-main event now. And I want to go... Well, we'll go co-main event, and then I want to talk about what was the craziest finish, in my opinion, on the card in Asu Almabayev.
Yeah.
The Sulayev stretch, as it were. But let's go Shara Bullet first.
Okay.
And before we get back into this video, guys, quick shout out to our friends over at Diamond MMA. If you train at all, you know how important it is to protect those precious family jewels. I'm a dad and I'm not done having kids yet. And Nick, he hasn't even started, but we're still looking for a lovely lady for him. Too bad this channel's 97% male. But seriously though, Nick and I were so thrilled when Diamond reached out for this sponsorship because Nick and I were customers for 8 years before this ever happened. If you take training seriously, whether it's jiu-jitsu, MMA, baseball, hockey, you name it, Diamond is an absolute must for you. So shout out to Diamond MMA. Back to the action. Back and forth fight. Obviously, Michel Pereira had real success in the first round.
Oh, yeah.
Got the takedown, won the round soundly, and, had some really good success with the striking as well, which led to Shara Bullet being on his back in the first round. So you have that, and then you have Shara come back and win the final 2 rounds, mainly with his kicks.
Yes.
And Shara Bullet's an interesting one to me because he has a lot of the elements of being very marketable.
Oh, yeah.
He has the downside of the fact that he really can't fight in a lot of commissions because he only has one functional eye.
Right.
And on top of that, he really is just a kicker, right? And he can do some takedown defense. He's getting into some grappling matches. As we saw, he had that match against Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah.
But Arman is way smaller than him, and that was a very competitive match where Arman, I think did more. So,
yeah.
He's not going to ever blow anybody's hair back as an all-star grappler. And I don't think he's ever going to really blow anybody's hair back as an all-around high-level striker either. He's a really, really, really good kicker. He may have the best kicks at 185, but I kind of draw the line at there. Like, that's kind of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I have a hard time seeing a high ceiling for Shara, other than you fight a guy, and this is no disrespect to Michel Pereira, but if you're going to be an elite level guy that's going to potentially contend for a belt, you tend to get Michel Pereira out of there, don't you?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And Shara Bullet is amazing with his kicks. I love the way he fights. If kicking is your thing, he's the guy to watch. Very entertaining. My opinion on who he should fight next is Atiba Gauthier. Shara Bullet versus Atiba Gauthier feels like it could be a wild, fun fight.
Yeah.
And obviously, neither of them specialize in the groundwork, but I would say Atiba may be more well-rounded to all around as a fighter, but Shara Bullet can make things very interesting on the feet. And I think his kicks stand out above everything else. Of course, we've seen the double spinning back fist, and he can get real creative with his spin attacks, and he does decent he does a decent job throwing his hands to set up his kicks, but for the most part, he is a kicking extraordinaire. So that fight to me feels like it could be fun. Now, the issue that I had with the fight, and this is starting to become one of those things, is there were some fouls that didn't even result in a single point getting taken away, and I don't know really what that was all about, because most of the time when you see somebody fouling, it's either an eye poke, a back of the head shot, or a nut shot. This was a different one because Michel Pereira has long hair like myself. He was getting his hair.
You took personal offense to this one.
Exactly, yeah. Well, maybe he should cornrow his hair like Sugar Sean, and then he won't run into this problem. But Shara Bullet was very clearly grabbing his hair and trying to control him when Shara was on the bottom. They were in a grappling situation, and Shara was holding his hair and was getting warned, kept doing it, getting warned, and then when they got back up to their feet, immediately poked Michel in the eye. So obviously, I think it was warranted to take a point away from him, but they didn't do that, and that was Herb Dean. So obviously, his name is in the news cycle once again, but not for good reason. So that was the one thing that stuck out to me, and I feel like it's going to cloud his victory over Michel Pereira, because people aren't really talking about the skills and the X's and O's of the fight. They're talking about the fact that he was holding his hair very clearly multiple times after being told not to, and still no point was taken away. So I get why everybody's frustrated, and I wouldn't push back on any of that at all. I think Herb Dean needs to understand that he's being watched more carefully than he's ever been watched before, not just by the brass, but by all the fans and everybody,
and the fighters especially,
and all the fighters who could wind up with him being the third man in the cage. So Shara Bullet definitely needs to fix some of those things. I don't think he's like a naturally dirty fighter, but if he's not going to get any points taken away, what's his incentive to stop doing things like that? Just like Cyril Gane. Like, if all you're going to do is slap me on the wrist and I don't even get a point taken away, why would I stop pulling this guy's hair? So I get that. But at the same time, I also found the first round to be a little bit interesting because Michel Pereira was in the driver's seat totally. He did a great job controlling that first round. Now, he lost the next two rounds, in my opinion. It was sort of clear. But it did show us that Shara Bullet has a major hole in his game, which is on the ground. And as long as he can avoid high-level grapplers, I wouldn't want to see him go fight a Bo Nickel, because I don't think that would end very well for Shara Bullet. But I think there's fun matchups for him. And I agree with you. It really doesn't make sense to, loft him up into the top of the division, because I don't think he'll be able to swim with the sharks, so to speak. I think those guys are all complete, but there are some really fun strikers in that division. And that's why, I really think Atiba Gauthier, being a star in the making, could wind up being a perfect matchup for him, because Shara Bullet's got the look. He's scary. He's one of those guys that looks like a Bond villain. And Atiba Gauthier, you could say the same thing about him. He's got the best body in the UFC. So that fight feels like it could be a lot of fun. And whoever wins will insert themselves into a more meaningful place in the division. But if it's Atiba Gauthier, I think now we see him on a more direct path towards the title. Whereas if Shara Bullet wins, I think they just find him another striker and give him that.
Yeah, I like the Atiba Gauthier matchmaking. And just to touch, I want to get back to Herb Dean in a second, but I want to finish on the Baku stuff before we move into that. But in reality, Pereira versus Shara Bullet should have been a draw, because it was 29-28, and you have 5 or so hair pulls. You have the eye poke.
Right.
And as everybody's saying, Tom Aspinall, Alex Pereira, Herb Dean is just not calling fouls, and he's warning,
right,
but he's not doing anything about it. And a warning with no consequence might as well not be a warning at all, because all it is just lip service. If you're not going to make somebody pay for cheating and for breaking the rules, I mean, this is not old school Hoist Gracie. What was the guy's name that he was able to grab the the top of the head. He had that one, like almost like Goro from Mortal Kombat. The name is escaping me right now because
the original Yuri Prohaska antenna hairstyle.
Exactly. Hoist Gracie was using that hairpiece to every advantage he could get. But the rules have changed.
Times changed.
There's nobody's fighting in a gi anymore. There's no there's
nut
no
shots.
more the 10,000 pound difference between the sumo wrestler and Hoist Gracie or whoever it is. So this is a more formatted, more regimented, and in a lot of ways more fair sport, but it's only going to be more fair if the refs enforce the rules that they're supposed to enforce.
Right.
And I like Herb. Like, I don't want to kick Herb too much, but he's making some mistakes right now that is one of the preeminent referees in this game he shouldn't be making. But let's go Asu Almabayev, and then we'll go back to Herb Dean because I want to put a cap on the Baku. And there's so many great finishes that we could talk about. We have just about an hour to work with generally on these episodes. So Asu Almabayev, what was that? The Sulayev stretch is what he caught on Charles Johnson. Now, Charles Johnson has knocked out some elite people. As you may know, the current champion, Joshua Van, has a knockout loss on his record to Charles Johnson. Very good against Lonnie Kavanaugh. When you think about him, as a contender, Charles Johnson is always game. He's always ready. And he also was dominated in that fight, start to finish. And the submission there in the third round was just the cherry on top because I had to look it up. I was like, I know I've seen the Sulayev stretch in the UFC before, but I want to see how many times it's been done.
Right. And
the first name that popped into my head was Zabit because I was like, I think Zabit had one of these.
Yes.
And so I was like, let me go back and see how many Sulayev stretches last night's victory for Almabayev was, and it's 4. So the first one happened back in 2013, I believe. The person is escaping me. But there were 2 in 2018. Aljamain Sterling. The 2018 was the year of the Sulayev stretch. Aljo hit one, and Zabit hit one. And then it's been, 8 years since we've seen one of those in the UFC. That submission's nasty, man. So you call it like the banana peel, right?
The banana split, right?
Banana split,
some people call it the banana split, and I know there's different variations of it. But when you've got somebody's leg hyperextended, and you're behind them, now their head's up here by their ear. It's a difficult proposition to try to get out of, and there is really no way out. It immobilizes your hips. It gives you no opportunity to turn. Gives you no opportunity to really fight back. So it's very high level. It's very difficult to hit in a fight, especially to hit it in a third round when everybody's all sweaty. Maybe there's a little bit of blood mixed in. So I find it very impressive that Almabayev was able to not only finish Charles Johnson, but to do it that way and that late into the fight. Very impressive. And Charles Johnson's one of those guys that if you can get a win over him, the future's bright for you. You can see a path towards a title, and Almabayev might just be the guy that's going to make the most leaps and bounds in the division now that he's got a marquee win like that.
Putting a nice win streak together. I think it's 2 submissions in a row now, so looking really good.
Yeah, I definitely like his style. I think he's a very solid fighter, and that submission will always go viral. Anything like that where people, even grapplers, if you're newer to the grappling game, you may have never seen that before, or you don't see that kind of position often, and it always has the opportunity to go viral.
It's like the spladle in wrestling. It's just so outrageous that it's like, oh my God, what is that?
Right. It's just like one of those things that's like humiliating almost. If you get put in that position, you're like, oh my God, like I'd rather you just knock me out cold than hold my leg up above my head.
Like that.
Stretching me out is crazy work, but you know what? Charles Johnson will live to fight another day. And Almabayev just got a beautiful highlight to add to his resume.
Yeah, I tell you what, and I'm not here to in any way, shape, or form call Charles Johnson's career in the UFC over. I think he's got a lot of legs under him, but if there was ever a guy who would get the money truck backed up into his driveway for BKFC when his career is done, it's Charles Johnson.
Oh, I agree.
Shout out to Asu Almabayev. Really, really amazing submission last night. To me, that was the finish of the night because when you finish somebody with a submission that hasn't been done in 8 years,
right,
you got to win submission of the night.
Absolutely.
So let's move back into Herb Dean for a minute before we move on, because Herb Dean right now is public enemy number 1 when it comes to the fighters.
Yeah, he's getting all the press and none of the love because none of the press has been very good lately.
No, and 2 big names that had some pretty negative things to say about Herb Dean last night were Tom Aspinall and Alex Pereira. Now, Alex Pereira went as far is to call Herb Dean a coward for
Right.
not calling these things out. Tom didn't go quite that far, but Tom made the point that, look, there are no rules in MMA. There's just suggestions at this point because
Right.
we're not following a rule set. We're not deducting points when points should be deducted. We're just following a very rough guideline that we seem to be moving the goalpost on by the minute. And both of those guys do have a legit claim. Alex was hit in the back of the head multiple times, and Herb didn't stop it. Tom Aspinall, obviously, we know what happened with him and the eye pokes, had to have surgery. But specifically to last night, there were hair pulls. I mean, Pereira's got long hair, as you said. He doesn't cornrow it like Sean O'Malley or some of the others that have long hair. And he got his hair pulled multiple times, and it was nothing but warnings.
Right.
And then after that, he gets poked in the eye really bad. Again, nothing but a warning. In a fight that went 29-28, that if a point was deducted, would have been a draw. You're talking about Herb Dean's lack of doing what he's supposed to do, actually now changing the outcome of a fight. Because I'm not going to go as far to say that Herb changed the outcome of Gon Pereira.
Right.
I think Alex may be stretching a little bit there, but he absolutely mathematically changed the outcome of Shara Bullet versus Michel Pereira last night, because a point should have been taken. It wasn't. And if it was, that fight would have resulted in a draw. So it's not a stretch to say that Herb Dean directly affected the outcome, and it should have been a different outcome had he done his job in there. And I like Herb. I don't want to kick him while he's down, but if he's not going to enforce things the way he should, he's had a long career doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Everybody's day comes. It may be time for him to hang up the reffing gloves.
Yeah, Herb Dean has, one of the hardest jobs in the world. Reffing a fight is not easy. And I don't suggest that if Herb Dean gets fired or if he retires, that all of a sudden points are going to be given out way more often, because he doesn't even, judge or ref, all of the fights on a card. And we see points that should be given all the time that aren't given by multiple refs. But what I will say is Herb Dean is not... Even though he's a human and he makes those mistakes, there are certain fouls or repeat offenders that just have to be called out. And I feel like if Shara Bullet would have gotten a point taken away, maybe the eye poke wouldn't have happened, because he would have gone, all right, I can't get risky at all. Now I'm going to lose this round, or at least it's going to be a 9-9 if I, if it's a close round, if I do pull ahead on it. So yeah, I do think that Shara Bullet versus Michel Pereira should have ended up being a draw. And that's only taking 1 point for what we're talking about, 4 or 5 fouls, which, at some point we got to start to pull maybe multiple points if somebody's just a habitual offender. But
3 points and then DQ.
Yeah.
That's what it has to be. To be that.
Yeah, but it's rough because, and also, everybody chiming in, like I said earlier, Herb Dean is being watched more carefully than anybody else in the sport right now, because they want to see if he's going to call fouls, if he's not going to call fouls. Tom Aspinall coming out and saying that rules don't exist anymore. They're merely suggestions. It sort of feels like the speed limit here in Texas, right? You see a speed limit sign and everybody's just blowing past it. So it's simply a suggestion. But in fighting, we can't have that. It's got to be black and white. I don't think there should be a gray area for points, and especially habitual offenders, right? Like if you give a warning, you can't just give another warning, because if they know that they can get away with a few things, they will. Like the old saying goes, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I don't want to see our sport get covered with, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I think people need to fight above board and try to make it as fair of a competition as possible. But if I were the referee, I would have tried to step in, taken a point from Shara Bullet, and then that would have changed his fighting style. And I ultimately think the fight would have continued to go the same way, and we would have gotten a draw in the co-main event in Baku. So, it's tough, because if you're Herb Dean, you're kind of in a rough spot. And like I said, I don't think that him being one of the most experienced refs in the world and having a few rough nights in a row is grounds to fire him, but he's also got to make some changes, or something's going to give and he's going to wind up not reffing the UFC anymore. I mean, just go back the weekend prior with the Andre Fili versus Oliveira fight.
Was Herb reffing that one too?
Herb was reffing that one, and Andre Fili's head in the illegal zone was bleeding. So you don't just bleed from your head without getting hit in that area. So did he miss that? Yes.
It was a drop elbow from Oliveira, if I remember correctly. Wasn't
I think it was. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. Usually, an elbow will slice you up pretty good. So obviously, we can't have those types of things happening weekend after weekend because they can truly change the trajectory of a fight. And it feels like Alex Pereira and Herb Dean actually have something in common where they're losing mass amounts of respect and fans because of the way that they're handling things, moving forward. Herb Dean came out and addressed the Cyril Gane, Alex Pereira situation. He got some pushback on it, but some people also go, okay, I understand that. But then he changed nothing about what he was doing in the cage. Alex Pereira now is sort of losing fans because he's not taking this loss well, and now there's rumors that like he did a seminar out in the UK and didn't do a signing, he didn't do the pictures, he didn't do the meet and greet. People flew from all over the world to go be with him and learn from him, and they paid hard-earned money to get those opportunities, and then like to be denied of a picture with your legend and a hero of yours is very unfortunate, and it's not how you want to treat the people who are still riding with you as you come off a loss, the biggest loss of your career, and are losing fans because of the way you're handling your loss. Now, I don't push back on Pereira for being upset about the way he lost the fight against Cyril Gane. I don't get upset about him for being upset about the elbows to the back of the head. But at the same time, you don't want to start to burn all the bridges in the space, because he was the guy with the most aura. He was the guy that everybody seemed to love. He was climbing the UFC's rankings and on his way to being Dana White's GOAT before that fight. And now people are like, he'll never be my GOAT, not acting like this, even if he would have won. So I get why people are upset. But it feels to me like Herb Dean and Alex Pereira are both very much in the hot seat as far as the UFC is concerned.
Yeah, and I mean Herb can't afford another few weekends like this.
No,
that's 3 in a row now. You have the White House, and then you had, as you just perfectly pointed out, the Andre Fili back of the head bleeding, and then now we have the hair pulling and the eye pokes from Shara Bullet last night.
Yep,
it's starting to mount on Herb Dean, unfortunately.
Yeah,
as a Herb fan, but the reality of the situation is that I feel like a broken record saying this, but like there has to be some sort of, this is the line in the sand. It's cut and dry.
Right.
If you do a foul, if you elbow somebody in the back of the head, you're going to get a point taken away.
Right.
If you poke somebody in the eye, you're going to get a point taken away. And then people will naturally change the way they fight. They won't range find like this.
Right.
They'll range find with a closed fist.
Right.
They won't throw big shots when somebody's, if somebody's working a single leg on you and you're clubbing them to the back of the head, you're going to modify that to punching the face here, working your takedown defense,
elbowing around the head.
Exactly. And those are the kinds of things that the game will just change. If you start to make the consequences more severe, fighters will change the way they fight as a result of it, and the sport will be a safer and cleaner and better sport. The last thing I want to say about the reffing is, it's not just Herb Dean, right?
Right.
Justin Gaethje was on Joe Rogan a couple of days ago, and he was talking about Mike Beltran and some mistakes that he made. And then even like what is completely insane that Jason Herzog, when he was reffing the Khabib fight, Justin says, I tapped 3 times. Khabib had me dead to rights in a triangle.
Yep.
I tapped 3 times. And Jason Herzog, after the fight, came and found me. And I was like, dude, why did you let me go to sleep like that? He's like, oh, dude, I know you wouldn't tap.
You're a warrior.
And Justin's like, no, I tapped 3 times. And he's like, no, man, I know you. You're a warrior. You would never tap. And Justin's like, no, I'm the guy that tapped.
From the horse's mouth.
I'm telling you that I tapped.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what are we doing here, right? Like these referees have to be, if you think about it, like just here in Houston, there's like 2 or 3 different local promotions that happen. Across the country, there's dozens of them. When you look, worldwide, there's hundreds of promotions, fights happening, dozens and dozens and dozens of fight cards happening every week, and there's a referee in the cage for every single fight.
Right.
If you are refereeing UFC title fights, you're held, and Jason Herzog is, Mike Beltran is, Mark Goddard is, and Herb Dean is. You're in the highest of regards.
Right.
If you think about the World Cup going on right now, the guys that are officiating these games, these are not your soccer refs that just, ref
Little
the
league.
pickup
Yeah.
league on a Saturday. These are the cream of the crop.
Right.
So I feel like it's not unwarranted to be more critical
Yeah.
of them, of the Deans, of the Herzogs, of the Goddards, than it is to be, the local guy in Houston. He's maybe only reffed 10 fights before, but these people have reffed thousands of fights at this point in time. They've reffed dozens of UFC title fights.
Right.
Like, at some point, we're going to have to say, you guys have to be held to the strictest of standards.
Right.
And right now, it just seems like a total shit show. It's a total free-for-all, and it's not good for the sport.
Right. Well, referees in the UFC have something in common with the fighters because you don't get those opportunities unless you've earned it, right? Just like the guy in the world title fight doesn't get there unless he's climbed the ranks and gotten out of the regional scene and wound up being a #1 contender in the UFC. Herb Dean, Mark Goddard, Mike Beltran, Jason Herzog, these are the big dogs, and they are the world champions, if you will, of refereeing, but they all make mistakes. Now, we can never get rid of the mistakes as a whole, but all of these guys need to be held to a higher standard and be able to make the calls that have to be called. And moreover, if something happens, in a scramble or in a wild scenario and it ends up ending the fight, I can give them a little bit of leniency. But when you have repeat offenders and it's like a stalemate position, like, being in somebody's guard and they're pulling the hair, that is blatant. It was done multiple times. It has to be grounds for taking a point. And what I'll say, just to give Herb Dean a little bit of respect, is if we get rid of him, if we get rid of Mike Beltran for the mistake he made, if we get rid of Jason Herzog for the mistake he made with
Justin Gaethje,
if we get rid of all these guys, there isn't a crop of more accomplished, more experienced referees out there in the world that are going to do a better job. You might actually get significantly worse refereeing if you start to bring guys that are on the regional scene right now up into those high-profile slots. So I don't know what you do, but you have to make some changes because even though these guys are the best in the business, the best are making mistakes, and we can't afford to have that happen, especially as high-profile as world title fights in the UFC or Freedom 250, like the biggest card of all time, events that can potentially be tarnished and the outcomes be swayed a little bit and just the overall consensus from the general public being skewed because of illegal moves. Illegal moves need to be considered as blatant fouls, and we have to start taking points. If we don't take points, nobody's going to learn a damn thing.
Yeah, and I think Goddard's the best in the game right now. I really do. Like, if you think about...
Unless he's got Conor McGregor jumping over the octagon side and coming to get into his face, right? That was the one time it was like, what is going to happen here? That was crazy.
That was wild, actually. Probably he won't be reffing Conor's fight. So,
yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I want to move into a little bit of 155 stuff right now because there's a lot of moving parts. Obviously, the main event last night for Baku was 155. So Fiziev inserting himself in there. Now, two things that I've been kind of following this week on X and on the various social medias is that Charles Oliveira keeps hinting at, more and more strongly that he already has his next fight.
Right.
He already has it booked. He knows when and where and who the opponent's going to be. And so I'm thinking immediately, it's not going to be Fiziev because he asked for the BMF, but he just came off a win. It's going to be some time. So it won't be Fiziev. It'll probably be for the BMF belt. Justin Gaethje, we know, is not going to fight this year.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Charles is necessarily at the tippy top of the list for opponents.
No. And based off what the UFC is doing with him right now, after his performance at the BMF fight with Max Holloway, he's not getting the Conor McGregor fight like Max Holloway is because of his performance. So I get that too.
And a lot of people think that it's Arman, which would make sense. I mean, Arman is coming up on almost a year. In the fall, it'll be a year since he's fought in the octagon, and he's had a generational run. Yeah. But that run has not had anything really to do with him competing inside of the UFC's octagon. It's had to do with streaming and
RAF,
RAF aligning himself with Nina Drama and some of the other big streamers out there, and like
Hype Brazil.
Exactly, he's put together a hell of a marketing campaign, one that really should be studied. But he does need to get back inside the octagon again. And now that there's kind of somewhat of a logjam at 55, it seems like the most likely opponent for Charles is going to be Arman. Now, the other part of this conversation where I want to take it is twofold. One, that kind of tells me that the UFC is looking to the winner of Max and Conor for Justin, right? I think. And then two, the wild card to that would be Jesus Gallo, who's Ilia Topuria's one of his trainers, came out and said that Ilia actually only needs about 6 more weeks to be fully healed.
That's
a
crazy.
couple more to get back to wrestling and training, and then they're eyeing a return date in December. So I want to talk about, is that a bad idea? I personally think it's a horrible idea. I think that's way too fast of a return for Ilia, and we'll get into that. But, could Charles's fight be against Ilia? If it's happening in December, what could happen there? I don't think it'd be a rematch against Justin, because Justin said, I'm not fighting in 2026 again. I've done enough for the company. So if Ilia's coming back in December, it's not going to be against him. Let's break it up into the Charles saying he's got to fight first and then move into Ilia.
Yeah, so Charles Oliveira needs to defend that BMF, and I think the UFC might want to see him lose that BMF if he's going to go out there and grapple like he did against Max Holloway. So obviously, I'd like to see him in a high-profile fight. I'd like to see another BMF get that opportunity. I've got Arman Tsarukyan qualifying, if you will, as a BMF. He's a short-tempered guy. He'll come out there and headbutt a fighter. He'll, like I said in the last video, he'll punch somebody in a wrestling match. He'll throw Uriah Faber off the wrestling mats as well. So I think that he should be considered for sure, but I also see them kind of looking at Ilia Topuria because him and Arman have beef. So I don't know if Arman's going to get Charles Oliveira next. I am sort of leaning that way, but I can't say for sure. And the one guy who I think could wind up having the most legs to getting the BMF title is Diego Lopez. Now, Diego Lopez is a 145er, but he's talking about coming to 155. He's such a company man. He'll do whatever the UFC wants him to do. I don't think there's ever been a call the UFC made to Diego Lopez where he said no. He's just going to come out and say yes, and that alone qualifies you for a BMF. He's down to go to 155. He would love to fight a legend like Charles Oliveira. I think it'd be a really fun fight. He's really good in the scrambles. So obviously, if Charles Oliveira comes out with the same game plan and tries to grapple Diego Lopez, we'd see some more interesting grappling than we saw out of Max Holloway. But, if he can stand and strike with Charles Oliveira or make it out of the first round or, get to a point where every round, he's starting back on his feet, he can make things very interesting. Charles Oliveira's chin is not what it used to be. He's been in wars. He's been in the octagon for literal hours of his life. And
his chin was never outstanding anyways.
Right.
And,
right.
It's with age and wars, it just gets worse.
Yeah, and he came from 45 as well, so he's the BMF. Diego Lopez just wants to fight. He wants to do high-profile stuff. I've been saying for years that he was going to be the next generation BMF, but it feels like that next generation has officially begun, because if he's moving up to 55, we're going to insert him with some of the biggest names in the sport, and no better party to start at 155 than the BMF title. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to see Diego Lopez versus Charles Oliveira. I also don't think anyone would be upset about that happening for a BMF title. And maybe some people would even put Diego Lopez higher up the rankings for BMF than, say, an Arman Tsarukyan.
Oh, I would. Yeah. I would for sure. I mean, I think Arman Tsarukyan's all-around better fighter and has accomplished more in the UFC than Diego Lopez. But again, Diego has fought for 2 undisputed titles, and he went the distance with the best featherweight of all time. So when you think about twice, and okay, so that's interesting. So if you think about the matchmaking, Charles Oliveira versus Diego Lopez, if Charles says, I've got a fight booked, and we know Diego Lopez wants to move to 55, we know he wants that BMF crack.
Didn't he say he wants to fight soon too?
He did say that. After the White House, he said, I want to fight soon. So let's say we take those 2 pieces off the chessboard, and Justin Gaethje says, I'm not fighting in 2026.
Right.
So we know Justin's not fighting Charles if Charles has already got a fight booked. Obviously, he's not fighting Diego. That would make 0 sense.
Right.
Ilia Topuria is saying, I want to come back in December. So Justin's not coming back in December.
No.
Which would mean that we may see the Ilia versus Arman fight that we want to see in November or December, which is very interesting because that means one thing and one thing only. That Justin Gaethje's fighting the winner of International Fight Week, whether it be Max Holloway or Conor McGregor, if he's coming back at all. So then you end up with almost like a 4-man tournament, Arman versus Ilia in December, and Justin versus Max/Conor in, let's say, January or February, which is going to make for an absurd showdown, sometime in late spring, early summer of next year. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but if we're looking at like reasonable deduction, that kind of looks like the landscape to me.
Yeah, Ilia Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan is the fight to make. Now, do I want to wait until December to see Arman Tsarukyan back in the octagon? No.
But I will wait for that, though.
But if I have to wait just so it's Ilia Topuria, I'm 100% down. And I always assumed these two would fight each other. I was just pretty certain that it was going to be for a world title. Unfortunately, there's no world title on the line, and I don't think that even if Arman were to get Charles Oliveira, that the BMF would go on the line for that. So I think it would just be a number one contenders match. Now, that thing could headline a show because Ilia's a star. Arman is the hottest, star in the sport right now, besides Conor McGregor, who is officially returning. But I think that Arman Tsarukyan versus Ilia Topuria already made itself. These two guys don't like each other. There was a long time where Ilia Topuria wouldn't even mention Arman's name, and then eventually he started to talk about like, okay, I would love to beat this guy up, and calling all the insults that you can call a billionaire's son. Ilia's been able to do that. So I think that is actually probably the most viable option for Ilia if he wants to return in 2026. If I was Ilia, I would wait until next year. The last thing Ilia needs to do is lose another fight. If he comes back and loses 2 fights this year, all of the steam and the magic that he has created on this 18-fight career that he's had so far would go away. I don't think that people would see him in the same light that they saw him leading up to the Justin Gaethje fight if he were to go out and lose another one, and especially if the reason is he came back too early and is not 100% healed, not 100% the man that he was when he was undefeated. So Arman Tsarukyan is probably licking his chops going, I would love to take Ilia Topuria on ASAP, and I'll do it this year. And it's probably music to his ears when he hears Ilia say, I want to return this year, because everybody knows Arman is just waiting for the phone call. He's waiting for the opportunity to step back in the octagon. He's not fighting because he doesn't want to. Clearly, he wants to be active. He's had like 9 competitions, and he's won all of them since his last UFC fight. So he's very much down to compete. He's flying all over the world, from city to city and country to country, showing up for events, live streaming, winning wrestling matches, winning grappling matches. So Arman Tsarukyan is very well conditioned right now and basically just living in a nonstop fight camp. So I think that could wind up being a very tough task for Ilia Topuria to come back to this early after losing the way he lost to Justin Gaethje. That may be too much too soon, and if I were Ilia, I would wait. But the fan in me that loves Arman and Ilia and has been wanting to see those two square off just wants to be a little bit selfish and say, let's push Arman's return towards December or November, and let's give him Ilia Topuria, because everybody knows that's a banger of a fight.
Well, what's so interesting to me is when you look at probabilities on Call Sheet for who's the most likely to be the champion of 155 pounds at the end of 2026, mind you. We're not talking about next year. We're talking about just a handful of months from now. Obviously, Justin Gaethje is the most likely, sitting at about 75%.
And that's a lock because he's not going to fight again, and that belt's not going anywhere.
But here's the thing. Ilia Topuria is number 2. It's not Arman. It's not Charles. It's not the winner of Conor versus Max. And it's like plus 190. Like,
wow.
It's not crazy, the numbers, when you think about, Ilia Topuria returning. I didn't even think he was going to return in 2026.
Right.
And there's a lot of people out there that the market is sort of dictating in the numbers that think that not only is Ilia Topuria going to return in 2026, but he's actually going to be the champion. He's going to regain his belt. Now, whether that's a vacant belt or whether that's against Justin Gaethje is yet to be determined. But I personally think that's a little bit far-fetched. I think that Ilia Topuria should not return in 2026. I think he needs to take way more time off than, that would allot for. And Conor McGregor said something really impactful when he was on Ariel Helwani's show. And he said, Ilia's got, basically, I'm going to paraphrase it, but Ilia's got a bunch of yes men in his corner.
Yeah.
And he's got a bunch of yes men in the training room. And he's just, icing these guys out on the mats because they got no business in their sparring with him. Conor said, you need people that are going to push you.
Yeah.
In my training camps, I bring people in, I put $1,000 on the outside of the octagon and say, this grand is for you if you can knock me down in this round.
Right.
And when you're talking about a rematch against somebody like a Justin Gaethje, you need those people that are going to press you, that are going to hurt you, that are going to come at you,
Yeah.
And there's people out there that can give Ilia Topuria really hard rounds. Unfortunately, they just don't happen to be in his camp. And that's one of the beautiful things about a small camp is that everything is about you. His brother's dedicated his life and his career to Ilia. His own UFC career is secondary for him. Is, you know, Ilia's career is the focus.
Right.
The rest of the coaches, they're not training other athletes. This is in Ilia's house.
Right.
They're bringing people in. They're doing all the hyperbaric stuff. They're putting the brain scanners on and all that.
He moved to Miami and is training at Boxer Gym, which is a beautiful gym, state-of-the-art facility, but there aren't number one contenders and high-level UFC guys there. Maybe they'll pop in every now and again, but it's not an American Top Team or an AKA or any of these Extreme Couture. It's not like one of those gyms. And the reason we see these gyms, you know, it's like the rich get richer, right? The American Top Team's just going to keep having world champions and high-level fighters because they're all in there bettering each other, sharpening the blades of one another. The famous saying you'll hear in every gym is iron sharpens iron. And I think Ilia Topuria may be just outclassing everybody that he's bringing in for camps. And he may not want very much stuff out there in the open. You know, everybody knows that fighters share stories. And even though a lot of sparring gets hidden and doesn't ever get posted, fighters will definitely go talk. And if they had a good round against Ilia Topuria, they'll go let all their friends know how that went. So I think Ilia is really trying to keep his community real tight knit, but I also think that it might be a good idea to get himself in there with these high-level contenders and other people, maybe align himself with some sort of team like an American Top Team or something like that. I mean, he's already in South Florida for the next few years, so it might not be the worst idea, because at the end of the day, if you're beating everybody in the room, you're going to get into a fight. And that fight's going to be harder than anything you experienced in the training room. And if that happens, then your confidence starts to fall. If you get into a fight and it's harder than you thought it was going to be, all of a sudden your energy starts to zap, your confidence starts to go. But if you're in wars every single day and you're doing like MMA math, right? Like, well, I'm sparring with this guy and he beat this guy, so I don't think my opponent could beat these two. So that makes me feel pretty good. If I'm, competing against welterweights and I fight down at lightweight, maybe there's a chance that this 55er can catch me. But if I'm able to fight and move real well in the training room against high-level 170 guys, there's a good chance that I can beat this guy. You end up feeling more experienced within the war of a fight, and then you're able to compete better and not be surprised with the level of difficulty that you find on fight night in the cage.
Yeah. Well, let's move into the boxing here in the last 10 minutes or so of the episode.
Let's do it.
Jaron Boots Ennis versus Xander Zayas. Now, Xander, 23-year-old phenom. This young man, very, very good and showed tremendous heart, but he was definitely outclassed by Boots. So Boots now 36-0, 32 knockouts, 29 years old. Now, why do I just rant off stats like that? The last person who was 36-0 at 29 years old was a guy by the name of Floyd Money Mayweather.
Oh, yeah.
And he ended his career at 50-0. Now, Boots has a long way to go. And when you look at the strength of schedule he has had thus far and the strength of schedule that he is going to have going forward, now becoming a household name, completely different things.
Right.
But he's in a great position on the right side of 30 to have almost 40 wins, be undefeated. He's got tremendous power. He's got great instincts to finish a fight when he's got an opponent hurt. What did you think of his performance last night?
I think Boots is truly one of the most skilled boxers in the world. And this year feels like it's the year of the southpaw, right? We just had Bam Rodriguez with a breakout performance the other day against Vargas. And Boots was able to go out there against Zayas, who's a very good boxer, durable young kid. Anytime you see these 23-year-olds that make it to this level, they've been fighting their whole life. They're so skilled, so durable, so tough, and they're young and athletic so they can move. But Boots was able to fight in the open stance for the majority of this fight and make it look clinical. I mean, everything he was doing from the opening bell, he didn't waste any time. There was no feeling out process. He got a drop of Zayas in the first round, which tells you, okay, he's already throwing live rounds. He's not range finding and measuring his opponent. He's going out there and looking for blood from the very beginning. I think that is a great instinct to have as a fighter, especially around that 154 weight class, because he's got enough power to end the night early for a lot of these guys. And a lot of boxers are conditioned to training for, yes, 12 rounds, but kind of easing through those first 6 to collect data, maybe steal a couple rounds, fight off points, and then really turn it up for the last 6 rounds. Boots is the kind of guy that comes straight forward, and being that he's a southpaw and loves to fight in that open stance, he can run away on the scorecards in the early rounds. But instead of that, what he's doing is piecing these guys up early and then basically finding his finishes early in these fights. So I think that if he's able to continue doing what he's doing, he would probably stand, in my opinion, as the guy with the best chance to match Floyd Mayweather's 50-0 record. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. He's got 14 fights to do it.
And none of them are going to be easy.
And none of them are going to be easy. Of course, he'll have a few, mandatories that he's got to take that'll probably be, easier than the others. But there is definitely a case to be made where we could see him at least hit 40-0 and then be streaming towards that 50-0, which is sort of the benchmark for all boxing these days. Floyd Mayweather came in, he finished at a clean 50-0. I guess with the Conor McGregor now it's 51-0, but at the same time, we all look at his boxing career as 50-0, and it's a perfect career. So Boots is going to have to, if he wants to be considered the GOAT, he's going to have to get to that number as well. The thing is, I do see him having more success moving forward because 154 I'd say 2 years ago was as hot as a division can be. You had some of the biggest names in boxing right around that weight class. Now we've got some of those names, even like a Canelo Alvarez. He's fighting up a little bit, but his days are numbered. Everybody knows Canelo's not quite the same as he used to be. Even go add like the Charlo boys, right? There was a time where that division was just humming and it had a lot of stars. Now it's not quite as deep as it was.
Triple G, it was good.
Yeah, and it still is great, but it's not as star driven as it once was. So Boots is going to have an opportunity to really make headway and try to become the pound for pound #1 boxer in the world. I honestly think after his performance against Zayas, seeing him drop him 3 times and in the 7th round, an experienced corner like Zayas has, throwing in that towel, said everything you need to say. And also Zayas needs to a lot of credit for what he did and how he handled that loss. He goes, look, he was the better man. My team has my best interest in mind. They're always looking out for me. They saw that I didn't have a chance really to come back and win this fight. Let me live to fight another day. That was the right call for his team to make. But I thought the fight was very fun. I think Zayas' stock went up, but not near as much as Boots' stock went up.
Yeah, Boots is going to be fun. So to get to 50-0, he's 29 years old. That's 14 fights from now. If he fights twice a year, that's 7 years. He'd be 36. That's not an outrageous thing to think, except for the fact that the strength of schedule is going to be, way, way harder going forward. Now, the other guy, Ben Whittaker, the surgeon.
Oh, yeah.
This guy's surgical, right? He's got a very fitting fight name. I love watching him as a prospect, and I do think he's going to become an undisputed champion. It's only just a matter of time.
Yeah.
He's technically so clean, so accurate, so sharp. He moves with such fluidity in there. Ben Whittaker is one, man. He's going to be a champion this time next year. I fully believe it.
Ben Whittaker has it. A lot of time in sports, we look for the it factor, and Ben Whittaker is just 100% what a promoter's looking for. There's a reason Eddie Hearn has him in a tight grip. Right. He's not letting that guy go. I'd say Ben Whittaker is twice as marketable as a Conor Benn. And we see what Conor Benn is now pulling in money-wise. So I think the sky is the limit for Ben Whittaker. He is very surgical. I think the fight name being the surgeon is spot on for him. And just like Boots, he doesn't waste much time, measuring his opponent and feeling it out. He's like the drunken master of today's era. He's real clean. He'll dance in front of you, flash his feet a little bit, throw some really nice combinations. And, it took him 3 minutes and about 15 seconds to get Rivera out of there. And Rivera is a durable, tough dude that is experienced in boxing. But he had nothing, absolutely nothing for Ben Whittaker. I think Ben could wind up being one of those guys that can not only compete with the best boxers in the world in his weight class, but also be a star and compete with the stars in boxing and in all combat sports. He's great on the microphone. He always looks the part. The tattoos are cool. I don't know what they mean. I think they might have something to do with anime. That's above my head. I don't know that stuff, but he really does seem like a blossoming prospect that could absolutely make headwaves, especially because of the division and the people that they're looking to pair him up against. Now, he's going to fight in October, and that's not going to be against a major name, but I think he's going to headline an event over in the UK. After that, Eddie Hearn said, I am looking at getting him an undisputed title, making him a world champion, and then we're all we're completely open for fighting the Bivals, the Better Bievs, all of the big names that seem to be like the juggernauts of his division. We want to see him out there with them because we've grown accustomed to those guys. We know how skilled they are, but Ben Whittaker brings something a little bit different. He's real fast. I mean, the way he's able to see shots, that check hook to finish the night was beautiful. He's always getting out of the way. I don't think he took any damage. He barely got touched. A glove almost, might have grazed him a time or two, but that's about it. So I think that Ben Whittaker, if he stays on this path and keeps, progressing with his skill development, he's going to be a real problem. And I also think boxing will benefit greatly from him continuing to have success because he's a star. He's very good everywhere, and he doesn't seem to miss a mark as far as the promotion's going.
There we go. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. We certainly hope you enjoyed it. And if you feel so inclined and you think that we earned a subscribe to this channel and you have not yet hit that subscribe button, please do so. It helps us tremendously. And that way, when we drop videos, you'll be notified so you won't miss one. Have a wonderful day, guys. We're coming back at you midweek with a deep dive, one of the Barnhill Brothers' signature deep dive breakdowns. This time we're getting into McGregor versus Holloway. We are going to dissect that fight over about 45 minutes and talk about every potential variable that we see. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. And until then, have a wonderful week.
Peace.